Original post, October 12, 2023. TLDR, my husband asked for an open marriage in a very insensitive way. Very upset about both. Looking for outside opinions. My husband 43 male, and I 44 male, have been together 10 years, married 8. We've had a lot of good times, but a lot of rocky ones too. A few years ago, things came to a head and we nearly divorced, but we got counseling and worked hard on improving our relationship and communication. It was a lot of emotional effort, but it was working, and things were getting better. We were finally communicating about our issues, and I was starting to feel emotionally safe and excited for our future together. Until Sunday. Sunday evening, we were chilling in bed when my husband asked to talk, and said he had something big to ask me. He started by telling me how much he values our relationship. I've made him feel more loved than he ever has, and it's been soul healing in a way that he hadn't known was possible. But it wasn't enough. One person can't be expected to fulfill all his needs, he tells me, and he needs more. Not wants, needs. So, without consulting me, he'd come up with a plan to open our marriage. He knew of a website that sounded interesting and he wanted to sign up. He'd find a new guy and they'd go out once a week. I asked him if he's looking for something physical or emotional. He told me it's mostly emotional, but would have physical attributes too. He had ideas of what he wanted, but he didn't know what the other guy would want, so he'd have to find out. I asked him if he had someone in mind. He listed a few people he was attracted to but said they wouldn't be interested or available. I was informed I would still be his primary partner, and I'd also be free to seek outside of the relationship to meet my needs. I can't forget the excitement in his voice and the light in his eyes as he talked all about it, while my world imploded. This is not what I signed up for. He presented himself from the beginning as monogamous, as did I. I don't object to open relationships, but it's not what I want personally, and I thought he knew that. I also didn't sign up to be his punching bag. I can't forget lying there, feeling worthless after being told I was inadequate and was unable to measure up, feeling like our relationship was a gigantic bait and switch, and that the new, precious feeling of emotional safety was gone, possibly forever. Because this isn't the first time he's communicated his needs in a way that hurt me. Or the second. It's happened over and over. It's why we nearly divorced. We've spent yesterday and today trying to work through this. We have some ideas, but I'm not willing to implement them until I feel safe. This is where we reached an impasse. He thinks that he's communicating the best way he knows how, but it's difficult because we're both autistic and my expectations are very high. He says I have RSD, so these kinds of misunderstandings are unavoidable. My side is that this incident is part of a larger pattern which is emotionally abusive, and I'm not obligated to put up with it no matter his reasons. I feel he needs to take the initiative and learn how to communicate his needs without harming me any more than necessary. I also want to throw this in because I think it's relevant. In the last 6 months or so, he doesn't look at me the way he used to. He's updated his style to look younger, and he's gotten into the best shape I've ever seen him in. He looks fantastic. Would you lovely people share your thoughts please? Update 1, May 2, 2024, 6.5 months later. I was asked for an update to this post. Summary: my husband told me I wasn't meeting his needs and asked if he could cheat on me once a week. TLDR, husband followed up his open marriage request with an ultimatum he didn't mean. We've downgraded to friends with benefits. We talked about the open marriage, and I told him I did not want that because it's just a slow divorce. He decided I was right, and said he didn't want to open it anymore. There was no apology for telling me I was inadequate. After talking a bit, we got down to the real problem. He wanted to go back to the dumb dad, little boy, play that we had done extensively during our early marriage, until he'd gotten to be such a brat that I'd threatened to divorce him. We'd continued in a limited fashion, but I no longer felt safe as his daddy and my heart wasn't in it anymore. I asked him lots of questions to find out specifically what he wanted, and it was a repeat of our early marriage: extra love and attention, no responsibility, no accountability. It was not to be role play for brief periods of time but a semi-permanent state. He was so excited talking about it, right up until I asked him how we would ensure that the toxic patterns that happened in our early marriage didn't happen again. He had no interest in talking about that beyond diagnosing me with RSD, i.e., calling me crazy. It was enlightening that someone who was asking for so much would offer so little in return. I told him I wanted to pause all power dynamics we'd been doing. There would be no more role play until we could meet as equals. I asked him for suggestions to make that happen. He had none. I came up with the idea of writing a marriage contract that specified our responsibilities. We also started marriage counseling. Things were okay for a few months. His birthday was in November, and I made an exception on the no role play and took care of him all day, let him get as messed up as he wanted, dressed him, took him to the store for snacks, drove him 6 hours to our destination, got us checked in, gave him a chastity cage, he'd asked for one, and locked it on him for a bit, played games until it was time to head to our concert, navigated there, hung out, took him for treats, navigated back. His only responsibility was to hold my hand so he didn't get lost. We had a good time, he was very happy. In the weeks after his birthday, he wanted to build up his endurance on how long he could have the cage on, and kept asking me to lock him up or unlock him. At first, it was just for an hour or so, but it soon got to the point where I was his de facto key holder and he was locked up for days at a time. I didn't like that a power dynamic was forming, so I did what he'd done when asked to be my key holder. I acted obviously uninterested until he stopped asking. I didn't want to shut it down any harder as I didn't want to ruin the present. A month later, life gave me another crisis. My son, 14 male, had been SAED by a peer, and his mental health had tanked to the point of self-harm and near constant thoughts of unaliving himself. His mom and I were trying to support him, but when we tried to talk about it he would just smile and say there were no problems. But there were. Everything came to a head in December when his counselor pulled me in and told me to get him into a facility before it was too late. At the same time, my husband wanted to relitigate a fight we'd had 3 years before, when I'd blown up at him after he'd repeatedly bullied me. He was seeking assurance that I would always be respectful and never get angry no matter how he acted. That didn't seem right, so I resisted, and he accused me of lacking empathy. When I asked him specifically what empathy he wanted, he described me being his therapist. He wanted me to sit him down and run him through the confrontation, ask him about his feelings, be objective, etc. I spent a day and a half thinking about the best way to answer him before realizing that I simply did not have it in me right then. I was worried sick for my son and was coming to seriously resent my husband taking up all my emotional energy. Also, I felt that it wasn't my responsibility or priority to be his therapist right then. So, for the first time, I cited our marriage contract. I told him that he'd brought up this same discussion 2 months before, and I told him I wasn't willing to talk about it until our contract was well established, and that him asking me again when I'd told him no, and why, and we had not met the terms, was a violation. In the contract, it specified that when either of us believes there is a violation, all discussion stops until we mutually agree the problem is resolved. He didn't do that. Instead, he immediately pivoted back to his point. So I cited the contract again, this time for violating the violation rules. He admitted to that violation, so I collected the penalty kiss. He was supposed to be the one to do it, but he just stood there, so I did. Then we went back to the first violation, him asking me for something I'd said no to. Apparently, me saying no was not sufficient, I needed to ask him. So I did. I asked him to wait until our contract was established and trust restored. He got pushy. How long? At least 6 months. 6 months from the contract date or now? Marriage contract date. Why? Every time I tell him no he asks why. Because we have different understandings of empathy. I did my best to answer his questions, but he was unsatisfied and gave me a hard deadline of April to step up or he would leave me. Based on how little time he took to consider his words, I was 90% sure he didn't mean it, and was willing to gamble on the other 10%. I genuinely wanted him to go away and let me focus on my son. So I called him out on giving me an ultimatum, and he insisted that it wasn't an ultimatum, just him clearly communicating where he's at. I again called him out on giving me an ultimatum and he told me that ultimatums are controlling, and he's not a controlling person, so it's a boundary. I disagreed and defined both a boundary and an ultimatum for him. He asked for my source, I said it didn't matter as he was clearly going to do it either way. He doubled and tripled down on where he's at. He then got huffy, insisted his definition of a boundary versus an ultimatum was more pertinent than mine, while also admitting he didn't actually know the difference, and ended the discussion as it had become unproductive. He left it there for 5 days. Then, I reached out to him and told him in no uncertain terms that I would not be obeying him now or in April, and asked where he wanted to go from here. And guess what? I was right. Where he's at, was not in fact where he was at. He wanted to go back to the rules. You know, the ones he broke the first time I cited them. He wanted to sweep everything under the rug like it didn't happen. I told him I was no longer interested in that, and wanted to accept his request to open our marriage. He asked if this was really just a slow divorce and I confirmed that it was. He asked me to reconsider, I told him the trust is broken. I'm tired of repeating these cycles, I'm no longer willing to do marriage counseling, I think we'd do better as friends, and I wanted to permanently downgrade our marriage to a situationship. He countered and suggested we move to a situationship for 6 months, then reassess, which I accepted. We're now on month 5 of 6, my 45th birthday was during the first month. I celebrated alone in Vegas and cried myself to sleep. When he started talking about Valentine's Day, I told him I didn't want to celebrate it. He asked why, and when I told him it felt weird, he downgraded us to just friends, didn't want me to touch him anymore. I had no problem with that, too checked out, which I think surprised him. That lasted about a month before he wanted benefits again. That's where we're at now. As for my son, he's doing much better. We celebrated Christmas in the mental institution's visitor room, that'll be one for the ages. He's out now and has been doing intensive therapy, and it's making a huge difference. He's learned so much and we're actually communicating. It's amazing. I'd love thoughts, ideas, or support. I feel really alone. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I'm truly sorry for what happened to your child, and I'm glad to hear that he is getting better. To be honest, I think you've already invested too much time and energy into someone who doesn't respect, appreciate, or support you. While you were struggling with what happened to your son, your husband maintained his narcissistic behavior. The improvements you're seeing in him are likely just temporary, and he will likely revert to his old ways. You should seriously consider starting divorce proceedings, seeking therapy, and moving on because you deserve so much better than your husband. How many more years do you want to waste with him? By keeping him in your life, you're closing your heart to finding someone better and only further damaging your mental health and self-esteem. Additionally, you're risking your physical health by potentially contracting a nasty STD from him. Edit: isolation is the worst enemy for recovery. It's time to reach out to family and friends for support. You should also start new hobbies that involve being in contact with other people in person to keep your mind occupied. I don't know if you enjoy being in nature, but you could consider joining some hiking groups. It can help clear your mind, allow you to travel, and meet other people in similar situations to yours. Story 2, my husband fell in love with another woman and wants to try polyamory. Original post, April 7, 2024. Hi. I've been married to my hubby for 4 years and we've been together for 12 years. After a lot of financial struggles, we bought a house, and we are now planning to get kids. The thing is, a few months ago, my husband fell sick and had to stay home for a while. He decided to pick up an online game and started having weekly sessions with a group of players. Among them is a girl, 30 I think, and long story short, he fell in love with her. He broke down crying a month ago and admitted it. He told me it built up so gradually he didn't understand how he felt until it was too late. They started texting privately after meeting and eventually had one-on-one calls together. Then at some point, he said, she told him she was in love with him, and he realized it was mutual. He said he told her it was impossible but loved her too. They tried to be just friends but they couldn't resist, and continued to show affection for each other, but also ventured into sexting. She asked if she could meet him face to face but he refused. So he told me all of this, apologized over and over again, and told me he couldn't control himself, and while he loved us both, it was me he would choose no matter what. I was still very upset and slept at a friend's that night to gather my thoughts. I decided to forgive him because he clearly felt guilt and wanted to work it out. I told him that while I was deeply hurt, I still appreciated him coming forward to me and being honest about what happened. We got into long conversations about how we were feeling in our relationship. I accepted he could love someone else but said I didn't like how he handled it. He agreed. And then yesterday he asked if I was comfortable opening up the marriage to polyamory. He said he still wanted to live with me and have kids but can't erase nor ignore the feelings he has for her. He says he wants to do it right and let us both see other people, with clear boundaries and communication, and still be present for one another. I'm going to be honest, it made me very uncomfortable at first. We have several friends who are poly, I know more or less how it works. But I never really thought about getting into it myself. I am not against it, it just never crossed my mind before. I am trying to think it through but it's a lot to take in. Sorry my writing is probably messy, but it's kind of hard to focus. I guess it's too early to decide and we have a lot more to discuss beforehand, but still. Could you guys give me your opinions on this? Thanks a lot. Top comments. Comment 1. So he cheated and now wants to be able to keep cheating by calling it poly, lol. Come on. Do not have kids with this man for the love of God, and if you have any self-respect you'll be serving him divorce papers as soon as possible. Sorry your husband is a cheating ass. Comment 2. You got married under the assumption you would remain monogamous. He is trying to fundamentally change the nature of your relationship. If I were you, I would drop any attempts at conceiving and figure out your next steps. Personally, I would not stay with someone who desired an open relationship. You need to decide if it's something you're willing to entertain or not. Update 1, April 25, 2024. Hey guys. First off, sorry I didn't reply to all your comments. I am very thankful for them. They helped me realize hard, but fair, truths about the whole situation. I waited for a bit to think about it all and had multiple long discussions with my husband. I wanted to confront him before making a final decision. To answer some of your questions, the other girl wanted to meet him, but they never did. Partly because my husband refused, but honestly, mostly because she lives too far from here. I still got checked for STDs, though, and I'm clean. As for our polyamory friends, they apparently were the ones who suggested him to go down the polyamory road. I stopped talking to them for now. I'll deal with the bigger problem first. I told him his actions hurt me deeply and that while I appreciated him admitting his affair, it was still infidelity. I told him what you guys said, that turning it into polyamory was merely greenlighting the affair after the fact. That polyamory should be built on mutual trust and communication, which he already broke. That I didn't feel respected. It destroyed him. He said he already knew, deep down, but didn't want to admit it, neither to me nor to himself. We both screamed and cried a lot. He finally admitted he wanted to open the marriage for selfish reasons. He is very sorry. He cut off contact with the other girl, let me fully access his computer and phone, and now wants to go to counseling to repair our relationship and marriage. He is showing me a lot of affection and attention since then, although he admits himself it's sometimes out of guilt and not just out of pure love. And now I want to make it work too, but am I? Or is it sunk cost fallacy? I don't know. Our first session is in 2 months, the earliest we could get. And every day I change my mind. Literally yesterday I wanted to leave him, while today I think it's worth giving it a try, because we've known each other for so long, we understand each other on a very deep level, share a lot of interests, and have already built so much together. He was there for me during hard parts of my life. He took responsibility for his actions and is really trying. Plus, if I leave him, I'd have to start my life nearly from scratch, find a new place to live, go back into dating for the first time in 12 years. I don't want to lose everything. It sounds very hard and scary. Am I not too old for this? But at the same time, that's a form of denial, isn't it? It doesn't matter if those years were good, it's not going to be the same. Even if he gains my trust back, even if I forgive him, I'll never forget. I think he is genuinely remorseful, but isn't it too late for that? I am too empathetic, him being present now doesn't erase what was done. Do I want to stay? Not because I still believe in this relationship, but because don't have the strength to ask for a divorce? Because it's the easy choice, some kind of codependency? I have no idea. I can picture both paths clearly, and it's tearing me apart. I am lost, maybe even more than I was when I wrote my previous post. I've lost sleep and appetite, and I'm not sure I enjoy anything in my life anymore. I booked an appointment with a psychologist, for me alone, to help with this whole thing. I am sorry, at this point, I am rambling. I know I am the only one who can decide what's okay and comfortable for me or not. It's ultimately my choice and my choice only. The emotional hell I am going through just makes thinking about that choice very hard and paralyzing. I'll go to both therapies and try to see what to do from here. I'll try to update, but it's probably going to take a while. I am sorry. I want to thank you again for your support, and I am sending you guys a lot of love. Edit. A bit of information I should have mentioned but didn't because putting all of that into writing without omitting something is much harder than I thought. He cut off contact with her because once she told him she was married and wanted us both, she just ran away and broke up with him. There are times since then where my husband starts feeling sad or angry because of what's basically withdrawal. And for that, he's smart, least sensible enough not to blame me. What kind of marriage did we have before this crisis? It will sound so naive, it's my first and only romantic relationship. We were very close and basically grew as adults together. We could talk about anything and understand each other. We shared the same values and interests. What changed, I think, is that we got into a routine and he got bored. During our argument, he said he was addicted to the attention the girl was giving him and that he felt I didn't show him I was in love with him enough anymore. I told him that even if it was true, he should have told me instead of having an affair. On one hand, I have my faults too and I could accept this as one of them. On the other, I was taking care of him in the house while he was sick. I don't think he believes it, I don't think he means it. But it makes me wonder whether I was actually a good wife for him. Even though I am not responsible for his actions. Thanks again for your support, y'all. It's a lot, to process, but it helps me so much. Relevant comments. Comment 1. If you choose to stay, Don't be surprised if in a year you find him talking to someone again. Cheaters are sneaky. They'll show remorse and swear they've changed. Meanwhile, they're smirking inside because they've started a new affair and think they can get away with it this time. OP, thank you. It's obvious and well known. Once a cheater, always a cheater. But reading it helps me fight denial. I really need to break up with him. If not for myself, just to show him that actions have consequences. I really feel bad for OP, seeing your life fall apart right in front of you must suck. Also, screw people who try to open the relationship after they cheat. You don't get to try and get your partner on board after you get into a relationship with someone else. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.